When I was around 9 or 10 years old, my dad landed a high-paying job that forced us to move from a small town in Pennsylvania to Brookmont, Maryland. I say forced, but that's not entirely accurate. My parents were thrilled about the move, and it didn't take them long to decide. Within a month, we went from living in a tiny, run-down house in a low-income area to a massive property in one of Maryland's nicest suburbs. At that age, I was a pretty antisocial kid. I didn't have many friends, so leaving behind our old life didn't bother me much. My parents later told me that giving me a fresh start was one of the reasons they were so eager to move. The new house was enormous, and even at 10 years old, I could tell we were no longer struggling to make ends meet. I won't bore you with the details of the house, but there's one thing you need to know. The backyard was our favorite spot. It had a large plot of twisting hedges perfect for games of hide and seek or tag. But the best feature by far was the treehouse at the edge of the property. It wasn't your typical DIY weekend project. It was a massive structure spanning 6 or 7 trees with 3 levels and a proper staircase. It was more like a tree castle than a treehouse. For a while, my brothers and I played in the treehouse every day. But as they got older, they lost interest. Eventually, I was the only one who still played up there. It sucked being abandoned, but I didn't let it stop me from enjoying my little sanctuary. One day, I climbed up into the treehouse and found a folded piece of paper in the corner. The note read, "Hello, I'm the Marshmallow Man. It's nice to meet you. What's your name?" I was ecstatic. I assumed it was one of my brothers playing a prank on me, so I played along, hoping to lure them back into the treehouse. I wrote my name on a piece of paper and left it where I found the first note. For the next few days, I'd come home from school and run straight to the treehouse. Each time, there'd be a new note waiting for me. At first, the notes were innocent, but as the days went on, they got stranger. The Marshmallow Man started asking me personal questions like, "What's your favorite time of day to play outside?" Or "What do you usually eat for breakfast?" One question in particular still haunts me. "Which window in the house is your bedroom?" At the time, I didn't think much of it. I still believed it was one of my brothers. But then, the notes took a dark turn. One day I found a note that asked something like, "What do your pajamas smell like?" That was the last straw. I stormed into the house and confronted my brothers, demanding to know which of them was behind the notes. They both denied it, and started making fun of me for still playing make-believe. I was furious and heartbroken. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard tapping at my window. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I was already scared of the dark, and the tapping only made it worse. I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours, too terrified to move. Eventually, I forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I pulled back the curtains and almost screamed. Taped to the outside of my window were dozens of marshmallows. I was convinced it was my brothers, but I was wrong. That night, I decided to catch them in the act. When the tapping started again, I jumped out of bed and yanked the curtains open. But it wasn't my brothers on the other side of the glass. It was a man, an old, disgusting man with yellow eyes and rotting teeth. He smiled at me, and I screamed louder than I ever had before. My parents came running, but by the time they got to my room, the man was gone. The police searched the property and the surrounding area, but they never found him. The Marshmallow Man was never seen again, but the memory of that night still haunts me. This story has been on my mind a lot lately. My youngest son, Luke, just went off to college, and the house feels quieter than ever. It's funny. When the kids are young, you dream of peace and quiet. But when it finally comes, it's not as comforting as you thought it would be. Luke's departure unlocked a memory I had almost forgotten. When he was 8 years old, he had an imaginary friend named Jake. At first, we thought it was cute, but things took a dark turn when Luke started spending more and more time in the treehouse I built for him. One day, Luke came home with a black eye. When I asked him what happened, he said he got into a fight with Jake. I was skeptical, but Luke insisted it was true. I decided to investigate the treehouse and found children's socks, sneakers, and food wrappers scattered around. There were also pencil drawings of wild animals on the walls, including a gigantic spider with a face scribbled over it. I forbade Luke from going into the treehouse, but one evening, I saw something that changed everything. A sickly, frail-looking child climbed down from the treehouse and darted into the woods. I chased after him, but he was freakishly fast and disappeared into the trees. The police searched the woods but found nothing. No missing children had been reported in the area. Luke later told us that Jake claimed to be a magic boy who lived in the woods with his animal friends. He'd been trying to convince Luke to leave his family and join him in the woods. We never saw Jake again, but the memory of that strange, unsettling time still gives me chills. The aftermath. After the incident with Jake, my wife Christy and I were on edge for weeks. We installed motion sensor lights around the backyard and even considered putting up a fence, but the idea of closing off the woods felt wrong. The woods had always been a part of our home's charm, and we didn't want to let fear take that away from us. Luke, however, was deeply affected. He stopped talking about Jake altogether and became quieter, more reserved. He no longer played in the backyard or even looked at the treehouse. It was as if the joy he once found in that space had been completely drained. Christy and I decided to take him to a child psychologist, hoping to help him process what had happened. The sessions seemed to help, but Luke never fully opened up about Jake. The psychologist suggested that Jake might have been a manifestation of Luke's imagination, a way for him to cope with feelings of loneliness or boredom. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. One evening, while cleaning out the treehouse, I found something that sent a chill down my spine. Hidden in a corner beneath a loose floorboard was a small handmade doll. It was crudely stitched together, with button eyes and a mouth drawn in red marker. What disturbed me the most was the fact that the doll's face had been scribbled over, just like the spider drawing on the wall. I showed the doll to Christy, and she immediately wanted to burn it. But I decided to keep it, thinking it might be important later. I stored it in a box in the attic where it remains to this day. The woods. A few months after the incident, I decided to explore the woods myself. I wanted to see if I could find any trace of Jake or the boy I had seen that night. Armed with a flashlight and a pocket knife, I ventured into the trees, following the path the boy had taken. The woods were dense, and the further I went, the more I felt like I was being watched. I called out, hoping to provoke a response, but the only sound was the rustling of leaves in the wind. After about an hour of searching, I found something that made my blood run cold. In a small clearing, there was a makeshift campsite. It consisted of a tattered tent, a fire pit filled with ashes, and a pile of children's clothing. Among the clothes were socks and sneakers that matched the ones I had found in the treehouse. I called the police immediately, and they conducted a thorough search of the area. They found no one, but the campsite was enough to confirm that someone had been living in the woods. The police theorized that it might have been a runaway or a homeless child, but without any leads, the case went cold. The treehouse today. The treehouse still stands in our backyard, though it's been years since anyone has set foot in it. Christy and I have talked about tearing it down, but something always stops us. Maybe it's the memories of Luke playing up there as a child, or maybe it's the lingering hope that one day we'll find answers. Every now and then, I catch myself staring at the treehouse from the kitchen window, half expecting to see movement. But there's nothing, just the creak of old wood and the whisper of the wind through the trees. The Marshmallow Man and Jake remain unsolved mysteries, two eerie chapters in our family's history. I don't know if we'll ever find the truth, but one thing is certain: the treehouse will always be a reminder of the strange and unsettling events that unfolded in our quiet little suburb.